A high-stakes trade meeting for Canada tomorrow as Prime Minister Mark Carney is headed to Washington to meet with U.S. President Donald Trump. While Canadians try to temper expectations, some government sources have told CBC and Radio-Canada that they are cautiously optimistic about some steel tariff relief out of the meeting. But the uncertainty of negotiating with Trump remains a big concern.
You never know what comes out of a meeting with President Trump. He'll say one thing one day and change his mind the next day. Again, we need certainty. We need certainty for our economies. Hopefully they can come out with a great deal, a fair trade deal for both sides of the border. And I'm confident that the Prime Minister is going to go in there and do a great job. He's a smart business person.
Well, here in Ottawa, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre sees it differently. On the other hand, he says Canada needs to stop losing to the United States. Well, to talk about that, Conservative House Leader Andrew Scheer joins me now in the studio. Andrew Scheer, good to see you. Thanks for being here, sir.
Thanks for having me.
No more losing, says your party leader. What does a win look like tomorrow for Mark Carney?
Well, we believe it's fair to hold Mark Carney to the promise that he made Canadians during the election campaign. He asked Canadians to ignore the 10 years of Liberal policies that caused inflation, that caused a crime crisis, that caused a cost of living crisis. He asked Canadians to ignore all that, and in return, he would get a win with Trump. His exact quote was he was going to negotiate a win. He said he'd have a deal by July 21st. Here we are in October. Right. Still hasn't gotten anything. So what we're expecting is that he comes back from Washington with an end to tariffs. That's what he promised Canadians that he would do, and that's the bar that he set for himself.
Well, he said, this is the quote provided by the opposition office. It was June 4th, 2025 in the House of Commons. We need to negotiate with the Americans. These negotiations are taking place at a very sensitive time, but we are going to win. And then he wanted to say, and so are the Edmonton Oilers, which was not the case, unfortunately. But he says we are going to win. Now, does that mean getting tariffs all the way down to zero? Is that the only standard for a win? Because things have happened since the election that have kind of changed the whole context around this relationship.
Yeah, but that was the deal he made Canadians when they were making up their mind to vote. So I think it's fair to hold him to that standard. This isn't a standard that Conservatives imposed upon him or that even political pundits have. He went to the Canadian people during an election, said he would get a win. I've got a ton of quotes here where he was talking about winning, that he's a good negotiator. We're going to win. He said that in April.
Sure.
Keep our tariffs on until the Americans show us respect. I mean, he backed away from that. He unilaterally dropped counter tariffs quietly and got nothing in return. So what we're hoping that he does is that he just simply fulfills the promise that he made to Canadians that he would get these tariffs dealt with, that he would get them lifted. Right. And we're hearing that he may have a deal on steel. We hope that it's a comprehensive deal on steel, that for the sake of those workers, that all tariffs on steel are lifted. And we hope that he's going to come back with the same type of deal for every other Canadian good that we sell to the United States.
Well, he said we would keep the counter tariffs on until they show us respect. And I think you can make the argument that things have evolved, certainly in the leader-to-leader relationship with Mark Carney and Donald Trump than it was with Donald Trump and Justin Trudeau, right? I think we're in a much better place, at least on the Prime Minister to President one-on-one. Do you not agree?
Well, I mean, the fact that they may be having more pleasant conversations doesn't do any good to the Canadians who have seen tariffs actually increased on a lot of goods. I mean, we're seeing some just devastating job losses. 86,000 Canadians have lost their jobs since Mark Carney has become Prime Minister. So it doesn't really matter if the flavor of the conversations are more cordial than they might have been with Justin Trudeau. Tariffs are higher today than they were when Mark Carney.
But isn't that key to getting a deal with Donald Trump, having the relationship? Like we don't know where it's going to go, and I appreciate the politics of this, right? He ran on this campaign, and he made it core to his election in April. But if you don't find a way to work with Donald Trump, it goes even further sideways, even faster, does it not? I mean, that's the experience, it seems.
Well, look, I mean, it's just a matter of the fact that it's actually worse off today than it was. So that's my point, is that whatever he thinks he might be doing in terms of style or approach, it's not resulting in lower tariffs. Other countries have seen their exports going up. Mexico has actually increased the amount that it exports into the United States. Clearly, Mark Carney is not doing the types of things that other countries are doing to get a better deal. And the other thing that's quite bizarre about the Liberal spin on this is that they simultaneously blame U.S. tariffs for all the woes that are facing the Canadian economy. They accept no responsibility for the fact that they're keeping the industrial carbon tax, that they're keeping the production cap, that they're keeping a lot of the tax hikes that Justin Trudeau imposed upon Canadians. They're blaming all of that on U.S. tariffs. And then when we point out that they haven't gotten a deal on U.S. tariffs, they say, well, Canada has the best deal in the world and a lot of Canadian goods aren't even affected by these tariffs. So which is it? You know, is the Canadian economy
both of those
suffering?
things can be true. You can have a better deal than most countries with the United States and still a worse deal than you had at the beginning of the year and than you had on election day, because it is those key sectors that are getting hammered by the Section 232 tariffs of steel, aluminum, there's lumber, there's copper,
But that doesn't explain why
auto.
countries like Mexico have actually seen an increase in their exports. And it also isn't what Mark Carney promised. And you're right. Both things can be true. It can absolutely be the case that Mark Carney's failure to get a deal is a big part of the hardship facing Canadians or the suffering the Canadians are going through. And also true that keeping the production cap, keeping those Trudeau tax hikes, and keeping the industrial carbon tax are also killing jobs. So you're right. Both of Carney's failures can be attributed to the hardship.
That's not quite what I was saying, but I take your point. But look, Mexico, the structure of their trade with the U.S. is different than the structure of Canadian trade with the U.S. It's a lot of low-cost goods going in. So, I mean, you know, I'd have to dig into the numbers to see why it is different. But they're both kind of in the same starting point that this. Well, no.
Well, you have to dig into the numbers to defend the Liberal failures on this. I mean,
no. That's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying. It's not what the audience at home is hearing me say. I don't know the numbers on Mexican
Mark Carney
trade.
came on all kinds of CBC shows where he was talking about the fact that he was a master negotiator. He's going to get a win for Canadian. He's the guy you hire in a crisis. Elbows up all the time, he said. Here we are in October. 86,000 Canadians are wondering how they're going to pay their mortgage because they've lost their jobs. He hasn't got a deal on U.S. tariffs. He hasn't repealed the Liberal legislation that imposes all kinds of costs on Canadian manufacturers and Canadian job creators. I mean, the industrial carbon tax is a massive cost to do business here in Canada. Mark Carney has said he's going to keep it. The production cap chases away billions of dollars of investment. TC Energy announced $8.5 billion of new investments in the energy sector in the U.S. It's not just Mark Carney who's going to the U.S. It's investment dollars flowing from Canada into the United States. On all these fronts, Mark Carney we're worse off today under Mark Carney than we were before he was elected.
Right. I was merely saying on Mexico. I don't know the numbers on Mexico, so I can't say anything on that one way or another. But on this, we've seen the approach from the Prime Minister. It has been to roll back certain things that are irritants to the United States, like the digital services tax and some of the reciprocal tariffs, because there was a misalignment with the U.S. that it was tariffing things that was CUSMA compliant, and the U.S. wasn't doing that outside of the Section 232 sectoral tariffs. So that clearly hasn't gotten to a deal. There's hope, maybe, for some relief tomorrow on steel. What is it that a Conservative government would have done had you won on April 28th that he hasn't done that would have changed Donald Trump's mind on these tariffs? Yeah,
well, first of all, we would have been honest. We were honest with Canadians. We were honest with Canadians about what our approach would be. Mark Carney didn't promise to give it the old college try. He actually attacked people who said that he shouldn't have counter tariffs on. So all of the rhetoric that came out of the election when it was going to be elbows up and counter tariffs, and then he quietly drops them. I mean, that's the part that Conservatives are drawing attention to. It's the duplicity. It's the say one thing during an election and do something completely different when the votes are counted. It's the bait and switch approach. Pierre Poilievre outlined a fantastic approach to help Canada have a better spot at the negotiating table by getting more U.S. dollars flowing into Canada. When you have more investors in the United States saying, hey, we want to do business with Canada, we want to put our investment dollars into Canada, to the Canadian economy, that's when you get more leverage in the United States.
That's not what Donald Trump wants. He wants all the money to go into the U.S. economy.
Exactly. That's why we have to fight that. We have to make Canada the type of place that investors try to get their money to put into. When people around the table in Washington and boardrooms around the United States are giving up on Canada because of the industrial carbon tax, because of the production cap, because of our regulatory system here, I mean, taking years and years and years to get a mine built, they're not putting pressure on their Congress representatives, they're not putting pressure on the U.S. administration to change tactics on that, because they have seen a signal from the Canadian government, from this Liberal government, that their investment dollar isn't welcome here. So why would they fight to keep that access open?
But what do you do to get, because the CUSMA is still in place for 80 to 85% of trade. These sectoral tariffs are the issue right now. What do you do to convince Donald Trump, that Mark Carney hasn't done, that it's time for the steel tariffs to go away, it's time for the auto tariffs to go away? I appreciate your argument that if you get rid of the climate policies, maybe that will help investment. But that doesn't necessarily change Donald Trump's mind. So what is it you put on the table to get that done?
Yeah, well, first of all, they're not climate policies, they're anti-energy policies. The result of those policies actually lead to higher emissions because those investment dollars flow to places like China, where they build coal-fired electrical plants. We've outlined a comprehensive approach to get a better deal with the United States. It starts with putting Canada at a stronger position at the negotiating table. We also have pointed out that they've taken months to act on some of the things that Donald Trump has identified as an irritant. Things like better resources for border security, better tools. I mean, the public safety minister is wasting $750 million on a gun grab that he admits won't work, instead of putting those types of resources into the border, into things like stopping the traffic of
But do you think if Canada did that, Trump would drop those tariffs? Like, because I'm not sure there's a level of appeasement that if you get over this threshold, Trump says, good job, and these things go away. He brags about the revenue, and this is just a big part of his trade policy with every country on earth.
Look, if that's what Mark Carney and the media in Canada, the Parliamentary Press Gallery believes, then why during the election did Mark Carney promise a win? This is all Conservatives are doing, are saying, here's what Mark Carney promised Canadians.
I understand that,
Okay?
but
So
Donald Trump has said and done many things since then.
He has to be judged against what he comes back with. So he said he's going to deliver a win. That's what we're waiting for him to come back with.
Right, I get that, and I get the whole, and I concede your point on the whole, but Trump has said a bunch of things and done a bunch of things since then, right? There are tariffs now in a bunch of different directions. He's changed what
It's getting worse with Mark Carney.
Absolutely. Well, it's getting worse for a lot of people, and Canada's just overexposed on it. But I mean, do you not adapt your position when the circumstances of the person you're negotiating with adapt and evolve over time? I mean, isn't that what you need to do to try to get to a deal here?
I guess what I would say in response is it's hard to say how Mark Carney has adapted, other than just give things up without getting anything in return.
Okay. All right, Andrew Scheer, I appreciate this time. Thank you for coming as Conservative House Leader. Andrew Scheer.